I really feel in recent years the survival horror genre has been slowly dying. What was once a genre about conserving ammo and making every shot count slowly transformed into first-person adventure games with heavy focus on running and hiding. This transformative nature started around the time Amnesia: The Dark Descent came out, and suddenly everyone has this idea that you have to be defenseless for a game to be scary. If you have a gun, how are you gonna be scared, dude? I beg to differ. Regardless, I always found myself really missing the more survival shooter-focused games in the genre. Games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. Even if the games didn't manage to be inherently terrifying, I always enjoyed the one-to-one gunplay, where every move was carefully lined up because supplies were really scarce. It seems Shinji Mikami, creator of the Resident Evil series, felt the same way. Years after leaving Capcom, he created his own studio called Tango Gameworks. The first game out of these guys was The Evil Within, not really a spiritual successor to the Resident Evil series, but a game very fashioned after RE4, the last Resident Evil game that Mikami worked on, in an attempt to bring some life back into this slowly dying genre. Survival horror is one of my favorite genres ever. I mean, as you guys know, I'm a gigantic Silent Hill fan, but I also really love a number of the Resident Evil games, most notably 7, and when I was back in high school, I was a huge fan of Dead Space. And I've got the Platinum Trophy to prove it. The Evil Within seemed like the next logical game to get myself invested in. I got it the year it came out, and it slowly but surely became one of my most favorite games. Yeah, I know, weird, huh? I know a lot of people really do not like this game, but I personally thoroughly enjoyed it. So much that I beat it more than a dozen times and even finished the game on a Kumu difficulty, that's when you die in one hit. Yeah, and then I got the Platinum Trophy, and now there's nothing left to do in it, other than give it a proper review and post it up online. So yeah, with a sequel coming out next month, I figured there's no better time than to give this game,
James, what are you doing? It's September.
Dude, if I can walk into a Walmart right now and buy myself a Coffin Crisp and a box of Scaries, I can start my Halloween special in September.
Didn't know you were the month expert.
Yeah. Let's The Evil Within story begins with Detective Sebastian Castellanos responding to a distress call at Beacon Mental Hospital. Along with them is his partner, Joseph Oda, and his rookie-in-training, Julie Kidman. On the way there, they all hear this strange, high-pitched ringing noise, almost making Officer Connolly crash the car. Upon arriving, they find the main lobby riddled with dead bodies. After finding a single survivor, Dr. Marcelo Jimenez, Sebastian checks the security cameras where he sees a cloaked figure magically warping around, slaying officer dudes, and then warping behind him. This is the game's villain, Ruvik. You're going to be seeing a lot of him throughout the game. Seb blacks out and wakes up in a nightmare world where he's tied to the ceiling by his feet, and a monstrous butcher dude drags bodies off to be chopped up. Sebastian must now escape, find his surviving partners, and figure out what the hell is going on? I think the game is a fairly solid hook. I mean, it goes from 0 to 100 in mere seconds. What starts off as a simple response to a mass murder case turns into a Silent Hill alternate reality nightmare world where we no longer have any sweet clue what's going on. So the first thing you're gonna do is sneak into the next room, grab that key, and try to get your butt out of there. The entire first chapter has a heavy emphasis on sneaking around, trying to avoid detection. To do this, you're gonna crouch walk, duck behind cover, hide in lockers, and toss bottles to make distractions. As far as stealth goes, it's fairly rudimentary. Don't expect Deus Ex or Metal Gear levels of depth here. It's interesting though how the game reels you in with this first chapter that plays very much closer to modern horror games. You know, being defenseless, hiding from enemies instead of taking them out with a weapon. All of this is something that's only kinda involved in the main gameplay though. I mean, past the first chapter, there will be moments when you can hide in dressers and under beds and in lockers and such, but it's really only there for people that enjoy that kind of playstyle. Personally, I really don't. I'm way too impatient. There's nothing I find more boring than waiting in a locker for somebody to leave the room. It's almost the sole reason why MGS2 is my least favorite Metal Gear game. Honestly though, all this hiding really feels like an afterthought in this game. I mean, stealthing around for sneak kills is great because it saves on ammo, but hiding never really felt like it was the ideal thing to do in any scenario for me. Again though, that might probably depend on your playstyle. Y'all might like hiding, but I like busting some knees and dropping some matches. That's one mechanic this game has that's super cool, match dropping. When you knock an enemy down, you can drop a match to burn their body, so if they're not dead yet and you want to finish them off without wasting any more ammo, you can use up a match instead. It's also possible to burn multiple bodies with just one match. Even enemies that are still standing up, if you can get a hang of it, you can really get your money's worth. What I like to do is blast 3 guys all down with a shotgun, then light them all up once they're all down together, only using one shotgun shell and only using one match. Or if there's already a dead dude on the ground, you can wait for another enemy to get close, and if you can time it just right, drop that match and boom, you light them on fire. Sometimes there's also going to be enemies that are playing dead, and if you can recognize that, you can use up a match to get rid of them so you don't have to deal with them when they stand up.
You're no match for me.
Weapon-wise, this game is really whittled down to the basics, and I find the gameplay really benefits from that kind of simplicity. You've got the 4 main weapons: the handgun for those carefully placed headshots and for busting out kneecaps, the shotgun for taking out bigger dudes, blasting heads clear off, or, like I said before, knocking dudes onto the ground. You've got the rifle for picking off dudes that are far away with nice, well-timed, precise headshots. Oh, and finally, the Agony Crossbow, a really unique weapon that, like the matches, really help make this game feel completely different than any other survival horror game. It's a crossbow that has a number of different bolts. There's regular ones that'll just stick through people, stick them to walls, knock them back, whatever. There's flash bolts that'll stun enemies so you can get off those sneak kills when they're blinded. Electricity bolts that'll shock enemies and keep them in place. These ones are perfect for boss fights. Freeze bolts that'll freeze somebody solid, and explosive bolts, which those ones are pretty self-explanatory. While you can find these bolts laying around just like you'll find any other regular ammo, you'll mostly craft these from crafting supplies, which you'll find a lot throughout the game. Each bolt uses a different amount. The most basic ones, like just the regular ones, only use up 2, and the more helpful and advanced ones will use up more. I know what you're thinking, and I agree, crafting sucks dick, but it's really simple. It's just like purchasing them, kinda. You press the pause button, game pauses, you select which bolts you want, and then you just like spend whatever supplies you have on getting the ones you want. The different bolts can all be very helpful for different situations, and your own unique playstyle will likely determine which ones you use most. You can even upgrade them using brain gel, a strange green substance you'll find throughout the game. Using this, you'll upgrade an array of your abilities, including the performance of each of your weapons and Sebastian himself. Yeah, big gamer pro tip for all y'all, upgrade your sprint a lot ASAP because the default sprint time really stinks. You can run for like 3 seconds and then Seb's out of breath. I am not a fit man, and I can run 20 times that length. I assure you that right now. This is one of the biggest complaints I always hear about this game. You can't sprint long enough, and I really don't blame anybody for that. It really shouldn't be on the player to use all of their earliest resources in making the sprinting mechanic functional. I do like the upgrade system overall, though. It lets the player focus on improving whatever weapons and abilities they use most, allowing people to really play the way they like. If you like shotguns, make that thing hit hard. Make it so you can put way too many bullets into that thing. If you're more about popping off careful headshots, boost that crit rate on that handgun. And if you're a more technical kind of dude, extend the amount of time the flash darts blind enemies for. It's cool, I really like it. Another pro tip, upgrade the standard bolts to max when you can. You might not really think they're very helpful on their own, but the level 5 ones, they burn enemies on impact, making it an instant kill for even the hardest of enemies. And on top of that, it's silent, so you won't even draw attention to yourself doing it. It feels very rewarding improving your skills, and it makes exploration feel a lot more rewarding too. This game has a lot of hidden nooks and crannies, all of which contain extra ammo, health, and if you're lucky, brain gel. I think this is something very important in survival horror games, and The Evil Within gives the box a bold, strong check. Outside of the actual weapons, you can find additional one-off weapons. The first is an axe. You'll find these lying around, but you can only use them once each. But it'll instant kill anybody, and if you can get multiple dudes with the one swing, you'll take them all out together. The torch is similar, one use, instant kill, but this one instead lights them all on fire. Lastly, there's glass bottles, which aren't really used for killing enemies, but instead can be thrown to create distractions, or can be thrown at an enemy to briefly stun them. These are also great for setting off traps and bombs, especially if an enemy's standing near one. I like these weapons a lot. It gives the game a feeling of improvisation. You know, you see an axe box, you grab it, kill one dude, then you move right on. The game's got a solid variety when it comes to level design too. Every chapter seems to offer something kind of different. The first couple of chapters take place in an old village. These ones are very open-ended. There's so many ways to approach the situation. You might sneak around to the back door, going through a window. There's plenty of entries and exits to every building, allowing you to work around your environment to avoid or plan yourself against enemies. This level right here is fantastic for it. Your goal is to simply defeat all of the enemies, and you're pitted in this factory-like area full of ladders, railings, and switches you can pull to trigger traps and whatnot. It's like a jungle gym, and you're playing grounders, scurrying from platform to platform, getting the zombies right where you want them, all the while trying to stay the hell away. From what I've read online, a lot of people seem to really prefer the more open-ended direction of this game, and I admit many of the game's highlights definitely occur in this kind of level. Later on, the game sways away from the open-ended design in favor of longer, narrower hallways, but I don't think that's inherently a bad thing. I think that by having a good blend of both of these styles of level, the game hits a great middle ground between the open-ended village areas of Resident Evil 4 and the more claustrophobic corridors of Dead Space. I really like some of the game's monster designs, like the Keeper. He's this butcher-looking dude with a safe for a head, supposed to represent Ruvik's evil secrets, or I don't know. Every time you kill him, he comes right on back, giving you this sense of urgency. You only have the few seconds between killing him and him coming back to get that valve turned. Though I guess it is pretty easy to look at him and just think, wow, Pyramid Head ripoff. They originally weren't even going to use him in the game because of that. A quote from The Art of the Evil Within reads, "He wasn't very well received initially, mainly because the design looked like it was from another horror game. However, from a designer's perspective, intentionally using established designs is a foolproof way to get horror across to the audience." There's even a direct reference to Pyramid Head in the game. During the final fight with the Keeper, you fight two of him at once that spawn side by side, much like the final time you fight against Pyramid Head in Silent Hill 2. I really like this game's boss fights. They all feel unique in their own right. The Keeper will test your endurance. How long can you keep up the chase, getting only seconds of breathing room every time you kill him? One of my favorites has got to be Laura, a creature with long black hair and more limbs than anybody should really have. She's a recurring boss. You'll encounter her 3 times, 2 of which are actual boss battles. The first time, you'll scour a factory for things to light her on fire with. Torches, matches, foundry pits. It has you clamoring for supplies while also trying to escape her grasp. The second time around, you'll mostly take advantage of using traps, activating them by shooting valves and whatnot. I could go on and on about how this game plays, but long story short, I love the gameplay. The gunplay feels great, ammunition is scarce, so you're encouraged to play things carefully, you're rewarded for exploring, and there's a lot of room for experimenting and finding strategies that work for you. So if the game plays so well, at least according to me, why don't so many people like this game? Well, there's actually quite a number of reasons for that, and I do honestly agree with a number of them. Firstly, the game has some performance issues. Even after the game's final update, the game has a lot of frame rate problems and lacks cosmetic polish in many areas, especially the cutscenes. It seems like the game's camera does not know how to cut without something loading in late, and it's never something subtle like a character model not being there for 1 frame. I'm talking textures and objects that take up almost half of the screen, taking seconds to load in after they're already on camera. It looks terrible, and it's incredibly distracting. The frame rate issues are really on and off. It's mostly apparent during the outdoor village segments in chapters 3 and 4, and there's a couple of times where it'll slog again, like this section here, but the frame rate does learn to behave, and the game will run fine most other times. This is all based on my experience playing it on PS4, mind you. I can't speak for the Xbox One or PC versions, though I have heard that the PC version also has a lot of problems. Whether or not they've been fixed since release, I really don't know. And then there's also the aspect ratio. This was a pretty big deal when the game first came out. The game launched with this extra wide theatrical aspect ratio. I thought this was really cool at first. I'm a filmmaker myself, so it was something that I appreciated, but as I played the game more and more, I started to realize that this ratio just isn't practical. I remember reading in an interview, I can't find it for the life of me, so forgive me if this is not even real and I imagine this or something, but I vaguely recall Mikami saying something like, it makes you feel more claustrophobic, not being able to see the ceiling or the floor. On top of that, he wanted the game to be more cinematic, like a horror movie, hence them adding a grain filter as well. So yeah, while I can understand and appreciate that, it just makes the game harder to play. You don't get a tall enough vertical view, and it makes objects harder to interact with. Luckily, they did realize this months down the road after a lot of player feedback, and they have long since patched the game with an option to turn the letterboxing off, so this issue has long since been resolved. Alright, so here is the big giant thing everybody hates about this game. The story. It has been called nonsensical by so many people that have played this game, but I kind of really like it. Yeah, it is dumb, and there's a lot of plot holes, but I mean, I do enjoy this game's plot, believe it or not, so because of that, I'm gonna try to explain the whole thing. Skip here if you don't want to hear the story, spoilers, obviously, but yeah, I'm gonna do my best to try to make sense of this plot. Here goes. Okay, so the reason you blip between areas with no rhyme or reason is because you're actually in a simulation. Kind of. Sebastian, Joseph, Kidman, Connolly, every person you meet are all hooked up to a machine that combines their brains into a collective consciousness called STEM. The host is Ruvik, the game's villain. Since he's the host, he's the only one with direct influence on what happens in this world, kinda like a lucid dream, but it's only lucid for Ruvik and not lucid for anybody else. That's why he can teleport and have crazy-ass demon powers.
All of us are contributing on some level, but he's the only one with conscious influence.
For comparison's sake, I'd say, if you know how the world of Silent Hill 1 is a manifestation of Alessa's consciousness, and Silent Hill 2 is the same deal with James's, that's pretty much the deal here. It's a horrifying hell world created out of Ruvik's mind, and as such, every monster, location, and apparition represents some part of his memory.
This place can't be real. It's like jumbled up memories.
Ruvik spent his entire life researching this concept of hooking up brains to one another. Marcello, the doctor from earlier, once worked together with Ruvik on this, but later stole his research and published it under his own name. This made Ruvik very, very angry. Ruvik's also had his own physical body freaking destroyed. When he was a child, he was playing in a barn with his sister when the angry village people burned it down to get revenge on their parents for being super rich and buying all the land or something like that. Ruvik's sister dies horribly in the fire, and Ruvik barely escapes with his life. That's why he's all scarred and burned up. You learn all of this by experiencing his memories firsthand.
Trying to make me feel sorry for you?
And then at one point, Marcello had Ruvik's brain removed from his body to be used as a physical host for STEM. Ruvik, now existing only in this pseudo-brain world, recognizes Leslie, the mental patient that Marcello has been using in his experiments with STEM, as his ticket out. Leslie essentially is the only patient that's been able to enter STEM and come out alive, because his brain, while he's this mentally unstable patient dude, he's perfect for STEM for, I don't know. So essentially, Ruvik is trying to find Leslie in the pseudo-brain world so he can transfer his consciousness into Leslie, hence getting a brand new body to return to the physical world with. It's actually hinted at the very end that he succeeds in doing this after the final battle. Seb wakes up from STEM, walks outdoors, and he sees Leslie walking away with a much different posture than he normally has. Anyway, Sebastian kinda just gets caught up in all of this by simply responding to that one call at the beginning, but that's just the story on the surface. If you read a lot of the optional material, it goes a lot deeper than that. Seb has this whole backstory about his daughter Lily getting killed and his wife leaving him, but he suspects that they were both taken by somebody. Alongside that, there's this whole other story following Kidman in the DLC chapters that fleshes this behind-the-scenes stuff completely out. I'll try to keep this short, but essentially, Julie Kidman was actually an undercover operative for a mysterious organization called Mobius. They worked behind the scenes as Ruvik and Marcello created STEM so they could swoop in and use the technology to link everybody's brains together and control the entire world. You know, they're the bigger bad creeping in the shadows that you don't even know about until you play the DLC. Kidman was sent in by Mobius to try and take Leslie out of STEM. She gradually realizes Mobius's true intentions and tries to kill Leslie, knowing what both STEM and Ruvik need him for. She also learns that Seb's wife, Myra, was also a member of Mobius, which is why Sebastian ended up getting tangled in this whole mess. It ends really open-endedly, and based on the trailer, The Evil Within 2 is going to try and tie up all those loose threads.
So, yeah, that's the story, I guess, I think. Kinda, maybe. I don't know, at least to my understanding of it. Anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna go, like, way too deep into it, because this video would probably get way too long, and I mean, I could probably read into it on the Evil Within wiki or something like that, but I'm also worried if I do that, I'm just gonna find out that it is like this, it is just this big mess that doesn't make sense. I don't know. Things kind of fall into place. It's interesting enough, you know, it's not like, doesn't have any good writing or clever symbolism, but, whatever. You know what it does have, though?
Hell yeah, dude, those Hollywood moments. I'm a sucker for these. Call up Nathan Drake because the game's cinematics are wild eye candy, and I think that's why I often found myself not caring that I wasn't always really following the story super well, because stylistically, the game is very fun and very pleasing to look at. And I mean, it really does need that to make up for the writing and characters. Sebastian is as cookie cutter as you can get, you know, the hard-boiled detective with good intentions and a horrible drinking problem. Wow, never saw that one before. Don't even get me started on Leslie. He is the most cliche, ooh, the crazy mental patient character, you know, rocking back and forth, saying the same sentence over and over. Good lord, it's lame.
We must be collectively losing our minds.
Losing our minds. Losing our minds. Losing our minds. Losing our minds.
Come on, dude, that's dumb. However, I did think Joseph managed to be a fairly interesting character at times. Throughout the game, he fights off the urge to turn into one of the zombie dudes, and then he says things like this.
You ever had the urge to just jump? When you're on a high place? Or the subway rolls by? Imagine if you had that urge for a minute straight. Then 2 minutes.
Joseph, dude, you're starting to worry me. You okay, man? You alright? You need to talk about this? Okay, never mind. I really like that line. Say what you will about the writing, but it does have its moments. Overall, though, when it comes to narrative, The Evil Within is easily a style over substance kind of game, so you may as well appreciate the style when you can. I really like the game's lighting engine. The prominent use of high contrast and pure black shadows, it almost gives the game a noir feel, which helps elevate the sense of mystery within the game's wildly convoluted plot. I also feel the game has some solid pacing. They break up the action in really nice ways, giving you these nice set pieces to walk through between action scenes. There's prominent use of elevators, often in situations where you narrowly escape a monster. Sebastian even makes a joke about it near the end.
If I make it out alive, I'm never riding in an elevator again.
And who could forget the iconic save rooms, each one complete with the soothing, sweet sound of Clair de Lune being played off a record player. Oh, hearing that in the distance is the sound of sweet, sweet relief. After all the tense confrontations, hearing this song is always reassuring. Just for this game, they added violin to it, and honestly, it sounds so good that whenever I hear just the regular piano version, I now feel like something's missing.
I may as well talk about the DLC while I'm at it. I mean, other than giving you the majority of the story, it also plays really differently.
There's 3 DLCs, but we're just gonna talk about the 2 main story-driven ones. You play as Julie Kidman, following her side of the story. You'll even cross paths with Sebastian and relive parts of the main game through her eyes, and given prior events to each scenario, it makes things really satisfying to watch with the added clarity. Kidman's story has much less focus on action in favor of a more modern approach, you know, with no weapons, just sneaking and hiding. I think you get to fire a gun like twice in the whole campaign. It's alright. I know it's not my preferred style of gameplay, but I've seen a lot of others praise it for being a little different, so whatever. I do really like some of the unique monsters you'll encounter in her campaign, like Shade, this weird lighthouse looking thing with these long, elegant, womanly legs. It's so weird. It gave me a lot of Silent Hill vibes. It's super eerie and panic-inducing when you see that beam of light wrapping around each corner as you try to to avoid being seen by it. But again, the real appeal to this DLC is how it fleshes out the story and shows you the real behind-the-scenes villains, Mobius, and it's definitely worth playing for at least that, if you already like the main game. Now, of course, the final thing I have to talk about is horror, and like, duh dude, what's the point of this isn't a topic of discussion at one point, so firstly, I'm not gonna dance around this, I'm just gonna give it to you straight. The Evil Within is not a scary game. Maybe the DLC is a little bit, but overall, this game has never come close to scaring me. I would say it's probably about the same scare-wise as Resident Evil 4, at least the earliest chapters. It's a horror-themed game. I mean, there's corpses, zombies, you know, all the spooky monsters and whatever, but the game makes no attempt whatsoever to ever actually implement any clever horror gameplay scenes. I feel like all of the game's scares take place in cutscenes, and well, I rarely feel scared watching a horror movie, yet games, they've been able to terrify me. It's because of the level of interactivity and the strong connection you have with the game. When you're the one in control and you yourself look at something that wasn't there before, it's pretty easy to get spooked, but when you're just watching something, it just isn't as effective, you know? It's like you're watching the experience of a camera guy rather than actually having the experience yourself. The Evil Within completely wastes the opportunity of being a part of this interactive medium and just never really tries. Unless you're scared of hiding in lockers and waiting for chainsaw dudes not to find you. I know that kind of anticipation does get to some people, but even that direction doesn't last long. But when it comes to the raw gameplay, despite lacking in any good real horror, I still really love this game. It's one of my favorite games ever. I think when it comes to the survival shooter genre, it really hits the nail on the head. Every chapter offers something brand new without straying too far from the core gameplay. You're not gonna find like a clever character study here, which I do admit is something horror games tend to do better than any other genre, but you will get a solid, dumbass Hollywood adventure with some awesome gameplay. I'm really looking forward to playing the sequel, and I'll give that game a review too when it launches next month. It really looks like they're ramping up focus on actually good scares and terrifying monster designs too, as well as focusing on that behind-the-scenes story, fleshing it all out with Sebastian's wife and his daughter and Mobius tying it all together. But yeah, this game's dirt cheap on all platforms now, so I guess you really have no excuse to experience this Halloween season without The Evil Within.